Last time on Sprigg Plays Lamento Beyond the Void. Go! Red blood spewed into the air. The bandit cat's body collapsed without a sound. He went on like he'd made up his mind about this from the beginning, without any doubt or hesitation. This unknown silver cat. Just who was he? Above all that, why was he drawn to this swordsman? Konoe was attracted by something. But he shouldn't just be admiring him now. Go. It was certainly what that cat had said. Konoe turned around at once and began to run the other way. And here we go. The sand rustled as if fluttering about in a grand desert. The presences swayed. On the sand, one by one, there were cast-off husks of emotion. Unripe and fading emotions lay thick. They'd make a bitter sound if they were to be stepped on, even cautiously. A paradise of refined emotions, a fragile and ephemeral dream. There, the wind blew. The swaying presences pushed it aside. On the wind were 4 fragrant colors. Sometimes as sweet as a sugar pastry. Sometimes as still as the resting leaves. Sometimes as strong as the angry rain. Sometimes as sharp as restless iron. The 4 winds raged fiercely. They spoke of one salvation. Salvation to be rid of the cast-off shells of emotion. They flew away from this paradise. They were set free from their prison. How? It was quite simple, and even simpler when shared, but there was no one to share it with. No one could grant their wish. Because they could not reach, even if they shouted at the top of their voices, they knew they would not be accepted. The winds laughed. The sound from the 4 colors echoed. The 4 colors whipped up the sand. They could go to continue their search. Voiceless voices echoed. The 4 winds dispersed and cast long shadows onto the sand. One sweet. One quiet. One strong. One delighted. They looked at each other and scattered into the sky. They appeared to be enjoying themselves. No one could see them. 4 shadows laughed. The sand around the cast-off shells whirled up. There was an empty sound as Konoe ran with all his might. The 4 shadows turned into wind and disappeared. Oh no. How far had he run? All sense of time had left him long ago. Breathing was painful. Even so, Konoe wouldn't stop running. The silver-haired cat. That cat had a mysterious intensity to him. He remembered his cold blue eye. That cat was strong. He had a powerful air about him. He took on 10 or 20 bandits like it was nothing. Konoe was extremely grateful that he'd helped him escape. But why did he? Even though it was easier to just abandon a weak cat. He didn't really know. Was it just on a whim? And what was he doing in this forest? Was he a traveler as well? He was probably on his way to Ransen like Konoe. Konoe's questions kept coming. However, above all else, Konoe knew this cat was enveloped in powerful emotions. He seemed to crave fighting. The silver-haired cat moved sharply as if he were cutting the air. Just thinking about it made the hair on Konoe's tail stand on end. Something had reflected in his blue eye as soon as he crossed his swords. There was some kind of light dwelling in it. Konoe wanted to know more about it. While he continued to run, Konoe pushed the brush aside and suddenly the ground below him disappeared. He gasped strongly. The ground had given out to a steeply slanted slope. He hadn't noticed it. Before he knew what was happening, Konoe went rolling down the hill. Twigs and pebbles snagged against his clothes and scraped his skin. When he finally stopped, Konoe found himself face down in mud. He slowly lifted up his body. As soon as he tried, his head began to ache. His tail was tangled with his drawstring bag and ached too. He frowned and roughly pushed the bag aside as if he were mad at it. Konoe stood up, breathing heavily at the pain in his body. He shook the leaves and dirt off his clothes. What was he doing? Feeling pitiful, he looked up at the sky. The moon of light seemed to have quietly disappeared. Surprised, he took a look around. Overhead and all around him, steep cliffs protruded from the earth. Konoe's feet had slipped. Luckily, the cliff he had stumbled down wasn't quite as steep. Falling from there wouldn't kill him, but the others would. The thought made him shiver. For now, he needed to get back up those cliffs. He took a step forward and felt something strange under his foot. It felt strange and muddy, a surface unlike any other he'd walked on, and Konoe lifted his chin up and sniffed the air. Soil, greenery, and water, all of these mixed into a putrid scent of decay. He surveyed his surroundings. His vision was obstructed. It was dark and filled with fog, and the outlines of rotting trees stood out amongst it. The air felt oppressive and distorted. Perhaps this was the Yukoku Valley. Yukoku Valley. I wonder if that's the village? Or maybe Ransen, or... I don't know. He'd heard rumors about it in Karou. Inside the Forest of Illusion, there was a place where a strange miasma rose from the ground, killing the trees and plants, poisoning the water, and turning the air stagnant. It was a place where no living thing would tread. The story went on, he remembered. In the Yukoku Valley, there was a village called Kira, where a tribe lived in seclusion, away from the public eye. They were bloodthirsty creatures. It was said that if you met their eyes, they would tear you apart like beasts. The people of Kira, many had black ears and tails and brown skin, and it was said they had black marks on their bodies. Many of them matched the description of the cursed cat. Nevertheless, in reality, very few people actually went to Kira or saw its people, so no one knew if these rumors were true. Konoe remembered being interested to know more, though. Black ears and tails, black markings on their bodies, just like Konoe. Maybe if he met with them, he'd find some clues. Such a thought struck him now. If he kept going, maybe he'd run into them. He wanted to see what they looked like. But he was in danger here, if they really were as barbaric as the rumors claimed. Konoe perked his ears and sniffed the air, watching the state of his surroundings. The dead trees didn't have territorial scratch marks on them, but he could smell the faint scent of other cats. Here, Konoe followed the smell and started to walk through the dense fog billowing around him. Maybe the rumors really were just rumors. While he walked, that thought crossed his mind. He didn't know how vast this valley was to begin with, but Kira had to be somewhere around here. His vision was obscured and he could hardly see anything. After he had walked a considerable distance, Konoe could smell cats, but there was nothing like a village anywhere at all. Maybe it was just a rumor after all. He figured he'd continue to tread on through the soft earth of the unchanging marsh a little more. Gradually, he began to suspect there really couldn't be a village here. The noxious smog filled the air around him. It wasn't a place where anyone could settle down and live. When he looked up at the sky, he saw only the faint blurry shape of the moon. It was clouded by the fog. The forest was dark at night, but this place was truly shrouded in darkness. Only eerie silence followed him. Konoe would go a little further, If he couldn't find anything, he'd go back. He strained his ears as much as he could, paying attention to his surroundings and walking carefully, keeping his guard up. There shouldn't have been anyone around him. But... don't move. A voice suddenly echoed behind him. Konoe tried to look around, but something pressed against his throat. It was hard and cold. Cold sweat ran down his back. When did this cat appear? Konoe hadn't noticed him at all. Could he be a Kirin cat? Go back. A knife pressed against his jugular. The voice sounded expressionless, without a trace of intimidation, but that was what made Konoe gulp, strangely terrified. You're a cat of Kira? Don't speak. Konoe quietly relaxed his body. His silence indicated his obedience. While the cat behind him kept Konoe captive, he slowly began to change the direction of his body. He turned towards the direction Konoe had come from. But Konoe didn't intend to give in without a fight. Suddenly, Konoe pushed his body forward from the cat behind him. He twisted all of his body weight at once to wrench himself free from the hand around his neck. Konoe pushed both of his elbows back forcefully, but there was no reaction. A sharp wind flashed overhead, and Konoe ducked just in time. He saw the knife's dark shine in the corner of his eye. Konoe's opponent was a male cat with a larger build than himself. His black attire let his entire body melt into the darkness. Only his eyes, with its pupils drawn to thin slits, shone coldly. Chills went up Konoe's spine. In those eyes, he saw neither fighting spirit nor malice, only the urge to kill. Earnest, true eyes. His eyes didn't have the joy of fighting or anger in them, only the need to erase the life in front of him. It was a light that shone strongly with nothing but pure determination. Unconsciously, Konoe gave a low growl. His opponent glared back intensely. Even though his enemy was larger than him, he didn't avert his eyes. Though he was inferior in build, he didn't plan on losing. The power of a look was much stronger than words. The cat's expression changed for just a moment. He opened his mouth slightly. But his foe was silent as he stepped forward and brandished his knife. Konoe tried to avoid it, but he lost his footing in the mud. He lifted one arm to protect his head, and could barely evade the blow by ducking to the side. The knife didn't cut his flesh, but its blade caught his gauntlet. Konoe jumped back, unconcerned. A dry sound echoed. The fabric of his gauntlet had ripped and listlessly fell to the ground. Now that there was some distance between them, Konoe reached for the sword at his waist and changed his stance. But the cat didn't move. Even the murderous intent that clung to him gradually faded. Konoe watched his opponent's actions. Suspicious, the completely black male cat stood straight. You. The male cat opened his mouth to speak. His voice was tinged with confusion. Konoe straightened out his posture too, narrowed his eyes and stared at his opponent. It wasn't just his clothes. This cat was entirely dark. His skin was dark brown and his hair, tail, and ears were all deep black. Konoe saw what looked like marks on his arms. Interesting. There was no mistake. He was a cat of Kira. Your arm? The murderous look faded from the eyes of the Kirin cat when he looked at Konoe's arm, where the gauntlet was torn off. His gaze turned next to his ears and tail. Konoe's hood had fallen while he was fighting, so his ears had been exposed. Who are you? That's what I came here to find out. What do you mean? Konoe picked up the torn gauntlet and glanced at his bared arm. Even in the darkness, he could clearly see his mark. They became like this all of a sudden. I wanted to know what these are, so I came here. I have questions to ask Kira. The Kirin cat fell silent and stared at Konoe. a complex look in his eyes. He lowered his ears slightly. It looked like he was trying to determine if Konoe was telling the truth or a lie. So, Konoe looked him straight in the eye. The Kirin cat looked down to his feet and seemed to be lost in thought for a moment, but then he looked up. He opened his mouth to say, "Come with me." Konoe was bewildered by his sudden words, but the Kirin cat turned quickly and began to walk away, towards the village, he assumed. The black figure threatened to disappear into the darkness, so Konoe hurried after him.